You're
you
fine.
wiggling?
You're
Are
fine.
you? I said good morning.
All right. I do believe we're
Good
recording. Welcome. This is V-Day. We're recording. We're going to discuss Nancy Campbell's Power of Motherhood, Chapter 2. And this chapter is called Mothers Are Not Woman, but Womb Men, W-O-M-B, Men. And it was kind of a long chapter, 2, 4, 6, 8 pages long in this big book. And this chapter is just for everybody following along. If you ever do this chapter if you ever do this book as a group, this chapter actually brings out a lot of hurt feelings and defense mechanisms and all sorts of fun womanly feelings that we don't really like to deal with. And so I like to preface this chapter always with, there's a fine line between, at least I think, I'm going to let everybody else chime in, but I think somewhere there's a balance between trusting God for the size of your family and trusting God for, the procreation aspect, and the husband and the wife in prayer using their brains, okay? Because I know that there are segments of people out in the world that, like, for example, the quiverful movement, I don't know if they're kind of like flash in the pan or gone or still out there, but that group of people, they would say just keep having babies all the time until your uterus falls out. Okay, well, I don't think I actually agree with that. So anyhow, the words in this chapter kind of lead us to believe, well, they can possibly lead us to believe that we're never supposed to abstain or any such thing. But I just wanted to say that out loud because I've seen plenty of hurt feelings over this chapter before.
Yeah, if there's a chapter that's gonna get you, it's gonna be this one. We have a dear friend, I won't mention names, dear friend of all of us, who, when she first came to the study for the very first time, we barely knew her. I met her at her birth, like most people. She didn't really know any of us, and now we're the dearest friends, and she has 8 children or something like that. I've lost count. But she shared recently that she was so upset after this chapter. She was angry at me. She was angry at the Lord worked on her heart, and she realized she didn't really have anybody to be angry with. It was just the content of the chapter that was working on her heart, and now she truly is a really joyful mother of many. But yeah, it's gonna poke some sore spots, I think.
It does.
I felt like this chapter was hard because it makes it sound so black and white. And like if you're this, then you have to be against this. And if you're this, you have to be against that. And it kind of pissed me off because I'm like, I don't know if it's that black and white all the time for everybody. Like, you got to kind of talk with your own husband in your own marriage. And I don't know. It definitely started to rub me the wrong way. So I'm glad it's not just me.
I agree. I think there are times when, well, of course we all know that sometimes, like, God doesn't give children to everybody. That's number one. Number two, sometimes he only gives somebody 1 or 2, and then some catastrophic thing happens and they have to have all their parts removed. Like, that happens. But also there's this place where maybe some of these families do just keep having kids, kid. And now all of a sudden the husband's looking at the family and at the wife, and he's realizing that this isn't funny anymore. Like, she's overwhelmed. she's it's too much. It's too much. And I think that those are times when this is a heart issue between each individual and God, but I would never say, don't ever abstain. Don't ever, don't do the natural family planning. Don't God's in control. And God is in control, but I don't think that means that we just say whatever. What do you think, Maggie?
Well, I don't know if it's an appropriate analogy, but our life is nothing but choices. For some reason, God said, here, you get to make choices. And most of the time I'm like, why are you letting me make choices? I'm really bad at this. Can't you see? And really, in a way, life is all about the seeds that we plant. If you even want to talk about literal seeds, God put that system in effect. It was the very first thing that he gave Adam and Eve. Here's a garden. Here's some seeds. And Adam didn't go to God with each seed and say, okay, is it the right time? Where do I put it? What do I do with it? When it grows, what happens? He made his choices. And so we make our choices with our seed in life. And you're right that it's absolutely a heart issue, which is, I think, what makes it so difficult, because it causes a lot of necessary and frequent introspection and communicating with your spouse. And in the Catholic world, or in those circles, well, ours, frankly, where a lot of people practice natural family planning, they'll tell you that was the hardest part, was that every month you have to have this conversation again with your spouse and say, okay, what do we think about this? What are our reasons for, remaining open to life? Why would we not want to have a baby right now, or blah, blah, blah. But it turns out to be a really, really, really good thing for you and your relationship with God and your relationship with your spouse. Most people will say this. I can certainly say that. It would have been really easy early on to just stop the conversation permanently. Say, oh, we don't have to think about that anymore. Yeah. And I'm not going to lie and say I'm not envious of those people every hour of my life. But at the same time, just like it's a really great thing for a farmer to have to go out there in his field all the time and keep a really close eye on things and pay attention to the weather and count up his money and say, okay, what do we need to do? How much do we need to grow? How are the crops doing? If he could just go in his farmhouse and shut the door and have everything automatically done for him, or say, oh, not growing stuff anymore, have enough, it'd be easy, but would he really be able to call himself a farmer, or say that was the best way to do things? Right. Probably the worst analogy. I'm sure people could find holes in it, but that's kind of what keeps coming to my mind, is that we get to make our choices.
No, I thought that was a really good analogy, because, sometimes you need to not grow things in your garden for a minute, and you need to go through and you need to tend to your soil and, enriching it again, because it's completely depleted from growing things for so many years, and you got to tend it, and you've got to fix your beds that have fallen down, or maybe rework on your fence around your garden to keep predators and, things out, which
hi baby.
I think that was good too.
Yeah.
Okay, so on page 13, I liked it said Webster's 1928 dictionary explains that the word woman is a combination of the words womb and man. So what, and I wish I had one of these old dictionaries, because I'd love to look up some of these words. I think that's awesome. So I'm guessing that even in those years, even people who weren't following Jesus understood the integral difference between a man and a woman. Like, there it is, we have a womb, you don't. So I think that's really awesome. I bet it doesn't say that now.
Oh gosh. Is it even still in there?
I don't know. I have a dictionary. I should look it up. So I like that. imagining looking at, being a child and looking up that in the dictionary. And then the next page goes into different types of birth control and how these things attack the godly seed or life. Obviously, abortion. So a lot of people are surprised about what the pill and IUDs do.
Yeah.
I don't think this is. I don't think it's detailed enough. I want to ask a question. Actually, maybe you guys know, but so most of the pills and the IUDs, no matter if it's mini pill or whatever, they all they essentially create a hostile environment where a fertilized egg cannot live or implant.
As a secondary mechanism, usually, like as a fail-safe,
Okay.
that is built in. So to say that that is how they work all the time is probably not accurate. But they do have that as a fail-safe built in so that the womb is not creating enough of the lining that it needs for the baby to attach should a baby be conceived. But they're the primary, that's okay. We're lumping the pill and the IUD together, and they're really very, very different. So
Yes.
the pill primarily works by preventing conception by messing with your hormones.
Okay.
And the IUDs primarily do work by creating a hostile environment.
Okay.
Although the hormonal ones probably do have the mechanism that prevents conception to begin with, but they all have the fail-safe that should you actually conceive, your baby will just die and pass out of your body because it can't find a place to implant.
So the question I had was actually mostly about the copper ones. Aren't the copper IUDs the ones that don't have any hormones?
That's right. They just create a hostile environment.
Okay.
So you could potentially conceive every month and just lose every baby every month.
Okay. Okay. All right. The next section was, okay, let's see. Abortion pill, IUD, permanent contraception such as tubals. And gosh, we know a lot of people who've done this, men and women. And I also know a lot of women who 10 years later, they're getting a reversal because they want a baby again. I also know a woman who had her tubes tied and then 6 years later had a baby. What's the moral there? The moral is you're not in control.
Yeah, Corinne would tell the story of the Lolita League leader whose husband had a vasectomy and she had her tubes tied and then they had twins. And this was obviously a long, long time ago.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, drugs. Letter E was unnecessary hysterectomies. She quotes that she cites that only 4.7% are necessary. The other ones could so that's probably pretty close. Letter F, I always have a problem with it, and I had even a bigger problem with it this time. Curses. She says, the sins of the parents from the past third and fourth generations can bring a curse upon the womb. I disagree. Like, just flat out, I disagree with this. I know that many times throughout the Old Testament, as God is dealing with those people in a way that he does not deal with us today, there were curses like that were generational. You're gonna, this family's gonna hold the throne for this many generations, and that family over there, they're gonna be, wanderers of the earth for this many generations. But I think that was done with Christ. I don't think that happens anymore. And I think that our New Testament and Jesus himself talks a lot about that every person is responsible for their own bag of sin. We're not responsible for our parents. So what did you guys think about that one?
I think I'd have to agree with you. I haven't really done an in-depth study on it. Of course, there are natural consequences that flow from bad parenting or sin or bad choices that can flow down to, however many generations, of course.
Of course.
Just natural consequences, grandma took some new experimental drug back in the 50s, and now her daughter can't conceive because it messed with her reproductive system when she was pregnant with her, that kind of thing. But I really do like G, ignorance.
Yeah.
I think I can agree with that one. In fact, it kind of makes me feel guilty that I haven't had enough conversations with my daughters. For those who don't know me, I have a whole lot of daughters, and most of them are teenagers or adults. And I sometimes wonder if I have failed to portray a good heart towards motherhood. And because they're with me in my home and they see when I'm tired or sick or, what pregnancy's hard on me or whatever. And so we just don't talk about these things much, but I think I really do need to gather all my daughters around, maybe with this book, and say, here's the truth. It's not just your mom handling things badly.
Yeah. Yes. I think you're doing a fine job.
Well, you don't live with me.
You want to come live with me?
No, but I think we all know your oldest daughter and can see the proof in the pudding. So.
Oh, thank you.
Agreed.
You're not perfect. None of us are. Which is kind of good to know. I mean, because you've had a lot of them over there. So if you're still trying to figure it out, that's good that I'm still figuring it out. It doesn't mean I'm doing it wrong.
I don't think
you're doing great.
I don't think we all ever have it all figured out. I think that's part of the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to what the womb is. It is life-giving. Eve means the life-giving one. Genesis 3:20. Let's see. This is something that came up in actual group at my house, which comes up in our circles all the time, and that is this. And Maggie, I probably heard it from your mouth the first time a decade ago. And that is, our Bibles never, ever speak of bearing a child as anything other than a blessing.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. God calls it a blessing. It doesn't matter if these people are dirt, homeless, poor, or rich, or whatever. Children are always a blessing. And when we put that into our culture today, if we were to imagine that that you hit the lottery and won $1 million once a year for the next 20 years, after the first 4 or 5 times you received that blessing, you wouldn't be begging God to make it stop.
Right. I grew up in what are known as the full gospel churches.
Okay.
Where a large portion of the sermons and teaching revolved around health and wealth and how that was always God's will for us. And I'm not even going to go into the doctrine right now. But I do remember at a very young age, 11 or 12, when I really started taking notes, steering church and paying attention and trying to learn all I could, I would look around me at the most famous women pastors in these circles and the women in my church, and I knew because I had heard them, they spoke freely, that they used birth control. Or, the more famous women, I often wondered, why do they only have one child? I would just wonder. I didn't really make judgments either way, but because certainly there was not too much health and there was not too much wealth to be had. And the sermons kind of had this bent, well, if you're not actively seeking for God to heal you of blah, 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 or if you're not actively seeking to be wealthy, it's because you're a selfish Christian. You should, God wants you to have all this health and wealth so that you can spread it to the world. And I don't ever once in the big churches, in the small churches, in the little circles, ever remember anybody talking about this in relation to children. And I did wonder about it secretly, but I never brought it up because, God, what an embarrassing conversation for a 12-year-old. But you're right. They're only ever mentioned as a blessing. And Doug Wilson, is it Doug Wilson? Who said, in our society, children are regarded as a curse and debt as a blessing. Oh, congratulations, you've bought a $300,000 house, Oh, you're having another baby, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
It's really literally backwards.
Yes, agreed. Number 3, it is our blessing. The womb is our blessing. She references a little side book called Be Fruitful and Multiply, which that gets into have all the babies.
It's a great book.
All the babies.
Everybody should read it.
All the babies. Number 4, it is our glory. Yes. Where, and we do see that God used barrenness as a curse in the Old Testament on purpose. Like, he was like, and you were disobedient, and now you get no babies. So there. It is the seed of compassion. It is the seed of compassion. This one I kind of looked up some extra stuff this time. And I like how she gets into the Hebrew here, and there will be another chapter that gets into all the Hebrew words for children, but she does her homework with this. I love it. And it says here that there are 4 different Hebrew words for the word womb. So one of them is beton, and I'm going to just ruin these pronunciations, but so the belly, to be hollow. One of them is racham, R-A-C-H-A-M, and it refers to cherishing deeply, to have compassion, and she talks about how it's used for both God's compassion and a woman's womb, which I think gives us a nice picture of that. Rechem, which is probably close to the Rechem, R-E-C-H-E-M, matrix. This is the masculine equivalent. Yep, and includes the same attributes, a whole list of scriptures. And then Maya, the womb, the heart, the uterus, also to be soft and have sympathy. And so her point with all of this was us just making the connection between our womb and where we find our deepest emotions stemming from. And as I'm sitting here, since I'm a mother, I agree.
Mm-hmm. I remember one time when we were doing this study, there was a mom in the group who had had a hysterectomy recently, a necessary life-saving one. And she was deeply grieving the loss of her womb because it was exactly like described in this book, where she said she just didn't really have emotions anymore. And that, of course, is not true for everybody. We all know plenty of women who've had hysterectomies and haven't had that side effect, but it is certainly something to consider. I have a dear friend who's considering having a completely unnecessary hysterectomy as birth control. You know, she wants to have her tubes tied, and while they're in there, why don't they just take the whole thing out so I don't have to deal with periods anymore? I said, no, please don't do that. You need it. It's there for a reason.
Yes.
Leave it there.
Yes. Number 6, it is a sexual organ. She quotes Song of Solomon 5:4. My beloved put his hand in the hole of my door, and my bowels were moved for him.
So now we all know not to let our little 7-year-olds read Song of Solomon on their own.
That's so funny because Jacob was just asking me about it yesterday.
Was he?
Like, what are these Songs of Solomon? And I was like, I haven't read those. I'm not sure.
It's a different.
Yeah, we'll just skip that part. Maggie, then she gets into some of the statistics on what happens. She quotes some statistics here, like reduced sexual drive in 60%, inability to reach orgasm after hysterectomy, so on and so forth. So there's definitely consequences to this, to having a hysterectomy, for sure. Okay, number 7, it is a support structure. The womb supports other ligaments and organs in the pelvic area. That's true. Number 8, a haven for miracles. And she says Jesus himself was conceived in a womb. Number 9, a workshop of God's creation, which we all know Psalm 139, that section. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit them together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complete. It is amazing to think about. The translation was, I don't know what it was, TLB, whatever that stands for. She likes to use lots of different translations. Oh, the
Living Bible.
Yeah, not my favorite. But I do enjoy how she purposely looks for the translation that she thinks expresses what she's trying to say the most. I appreciate that. It is a weapon against Satan. Psalm 127:4, as arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of youth. And, that's actually something I'd like to talk about. And we could turn the page and look at it as a sphere of influence, too. This will go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I see and hear a lot of Christian couples who are living a godly life, trying to do all the right things. And for whatever reason, they are actively trying to not have children. And many times these individuals or couples will tell, when you ask, it'll come out that, they are trying to be a missionary.
Mm-hmm.
They want to go spread the gospel to all the world, and they want to do God's work, mission work, the Great Commission, this and that. And it's never really dawned on them that having children is like the easiest, well, I should say this, but easy in the sense that they came from your blood. There's an understanding there between family that's not there in other parts of the world or even in your neighbor's house.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you really actually want to have you'd be a missionary, have children.
Yeah.
You have so much influence over them. And so I think so many people miss that. And so I always like that section. It always makes me think of those people.
Well, because
of course there's 1,000 ways you can go with that, because ministries are different and people are different. But I am friends with a pastor's wife, and she comes from one of those churches where she's the pastor too. So she and her husband co-pastor. And I remember many years ago, she was pregnant with her 4th and devastated. And that was the word she used. Devastated. I cried. How am I going to work in the ministry now? They were planting a new church, and it was really expensive. And, her husband really needed her to be doing all these ministerial things. And I was knee deep in all these studies and had Titus 2 fresh in my mind. And so I kind of shared with her, well, the Bible has a really clear outline for women's role in church, and that's for the older women to teach the younger women how to love their husbands and kids. And that's your primary ministry. So hooray, you're still in the ministry. You're doing a really important job. She didn't appreciate that. And I don't know where she ended up, or if she ever, changed her heart, or I'm sure she once she held her cute baby, that helped a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because I think I've been ministered the best and been closer to God, or gotten the most out of in other mothers' homes, or having mothers come to my home has spoken quicker to me and gotten through easier than anything I've went to go be. Like, I don't know. So
me too, by far.
Yes. All right. 13 it is a site of judgment. As we were talking about before, the curse of being barren in the Old Testament. A birthplace of destinies. Of course, we can think of John the Baptist, Christ himself. A secret place. This one's always fun because it makes us think about ultrasound.
Yeah.
And so, I've had lots of ultrasounds, but we've actually never found out the sex of the baby. And I think it's more fun that way, but it is a secret place. I don't know what I think about that. I don't know. Like, do what you want. How about that?
I think that no matter how much we think we know, we're never going to know it all. People are always finding out new, amazing, incredible mysteries of the womb that we didn't know before. And it'll never lose its aha quality. So I'm all for science digging in. I think the danger is the attitude behind poking and prodding and discovering, because the drive behind a lot of this research and developing new technologies to peak in the womb is domination. We're in control of this whole process. We're going to figure out how it works so that, well, sadly, now we can manufacture humans for sale and buy and sell little humans at will and make them exactly the color we want, and kill off the sick ones or even the healthy ones that just, I don't really have a use for them right now. So it's all about the heart. I think that we need to approach that technology with a lot of respect and caution. And these things are not without their disadvantages too, their risks, but what do we know? All this stuff is so new. I mean, we're just now learning about the harm of ultrasound and Dopplers and, for when it first came out, it's totally safe. Remember when we used to x-ray people? Woo!
Right.
I want to go back, if we can, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a sphere of influence. It's a birthplace of destinies. It's I think those overlap a little bit, but I heard somebody counter once on one of those sites where people were saying that the world is overpopulated and we're going to run out of resources. Somebody said something that has really stuck with me, and that is, children are the Earth's greatest natural resource. There are solutions to all of these problems that we have on Earth, starvation and, misdistribution of the goods and the resources, which I really think is the problem. It's not that we're running out, it's that they're not used properly. Well, what solves these problems? People.
Yes.
People solve these problems.
Yes.
And we don't know which people God had picked out to solve those problems, to cure AIDS, to, finally develop the electric car and get away with it and get it out in the mass market. You know, we don't know what God has planned for these people. And it's easy to forget that they become productive adults really fast.
Yeah.
We just think babies, babies, babies. But these are adults who are going out in the world and changing things. If we're raising them with that mindset, hopefully, they're solving problems. They're solving the problems of overpopulation and, you know, all the arguments against having babies.
Yeah.
If you remember that they're thinking adults, it kind of fixes that problem. My boys were really taken with this verse just recently. They said, wait, what's the deal with the arrows? What's that verse? That's kind of creepy. I'm like, what are you talking about? I thought they'd really, ooh, we're arrows. You know, they're like flaming arrows? You're sending us out into the world as flaming arrows? And, you know, they're little guys. And so I kind of had to not share everything that was on my heart. But there is a lot of evil out there. There's a lot of evil. And the vessels God chose to show his goodness to the world are people.
That's right.
You know, his Holy Spirit moves through people. He doesn't just float in the trees and clouds to solve problems in the world. He uses people. And I'm not sure if that sunk into my boys or not, but it was a good reminder for me, this verse about arrows in the hands of a man going forth into the world. You know, they're warriors.
Yes. Yep. All right, should we look at the questions or do we need to talk about more stuff? Oh, we didn't do 16 and 17. A hospitality room. The womb is a hospitality room. And 17 is a place of dependency. 16 goes along with one of the questions, which kind of makes me giggle. I guess we'll get to it, but it asks about, oh, where is it? Oh, it's number 4. The Chinese meaning for the word womb is the palace of a child.
That's cool.
Yeah, we'll get there. Sherry, did you want to talk about anything else before we kind of go over these questions?
No, I think you guys have covered it.
All right, you get number 1. State why our womb is so important to us as women.
It's our unique gift from God is kind of what I thought. You know, it's the one thing that he gave just us to do and take care of. And so I think that makes it pretty important and pretty worth keeping.
Yeah. Close the door.
Number 2.
Yep.
Write down or discuss, if in a group, how you can better protect your womb.
Well, I bought Kevlar body armor.
I think you need that just for motherhood. Put it on each day. Well, I think it mostly just has to do with an awareness. Just be aware and remember that it's there, and the stuff that you eat and the chemicals that you're exposed to and the feminine products that you use all have an effect on your womb. And your womb kind of runs your brain if you're a woman. There are people who are going to hate me saying that, but it's true. And if you just have an awareness, I think that's at least half of the battle. Know how it works. You know, read a few pages in a textbook and talk to some people and learn how it all works. And maybe write down what happens for a few cycles. And it'll help you later should you need to diagnose a problem or help you put 2 and 2 together if you're having some issue that seems completely unrelated, migraines or something like that. It'll help, that'll help you protect your womb. Just being aware.
Yeah. All right, number 3. Why is it important to have the right attitude towards the growing child in the womb? Can you give examples? Oh, we didn't really go over that. She talked a lot in here about women that she knew who had basically bad-mouthed, didn't want the baby. And she gave some very strong examples, like nearly unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And how a child who was rejected in the womb might later then reject its mother, that sort of thing. And I don't want to discount that, because I do think that that sort of thing can and does happen. But it just makes me kind of think of how many times I've sat in a breastfeeding support group where baby can't get settled with mom. And I'm watching, and it has everything to do with the mom being completely stressed out. And I'm like, okay, look, the latch is fine, the baby's fine. The problem is you need to chill out.
Yeah.
Okay, like get your head wrapped around this, because this baby's not doing it easily because you're freaked out and you're spreading that to this child. And if I can see that in real motion while these two bodies are separate, I mean, you can just imagine what happens when you're still connected.
Yes. In one of the childbirth class videos, there's a tiny little clip from a commercial in Italy. So you can't understand the words, but it's an ultrasound, and it's a real ultrasound. And in the background, you can hear the parents arguing. And when their voices really get loud, the baby kind of jumps and cowers. And I don't even know what the commercial was for, but that was really an eye-opener. We forget there's a person in there, and they can hear and sense everything at a level that we can't even really fathom. They're connected to mom's hormones, her stress hormones, her love hormones, all that stuff that runs us.
Yeah.
It runs the baby too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal. All right, and then the one that I think is funny. Chinese meaning for the word womb is palace of a child. Explain what that means to you.
Free rent, good food.
I just think of it being warm and cozy.
Well, I thought of it as, someplace that you're going to take care of. You're going to talk about it kindly. No one says, oh, you definitely don't want to go visit Buckingham Palace. That place is a dump and everyone just goes there. You know what I mean? It's held in a high regard. It's something that's taken care of and cherished and thought highly of. So maybe that's the way we need.
It's where the important people live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's actually a really good one, Sherry. I like that. Okay, why do you think that many women choose barrenness when God says that barrenness is cursed? Read Deuteronomy 28:18. I'll find that while you guys discuss.
Because motherhood is hard. And these little children, I think it goes back to what we were talking about last week, that, they kind of hone us and sharpen us and help us draw closer to God, because there's no other way you can do it all. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable.
I'll be out in a minute. We're almost done.
All right, Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 18. Cursed shall be the fruit of your womb and the fruit of your ground, the increase of your herds and the young of your flock.
Which is your bank account back then.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That was your money back then.
Yes. Yeah. Women. Yeah, we choose barrenness. Well, most of the time it's just selfish.
It really is.
Sorry, like there's some ignorance sprinkled in there at times. Okay. But man, I don't want to sound like an old person. I know that every generation, as they, come into their 20s and then their 30s and then get into their 40s, I know that every generation, as they age, talks about the younger generation about whatever their problem is. Gosh, and I couldn't even remember what our parents talked about with the Gen Xers, which I'm at the end of. But anyway, is it just me, or are the millennials like vastly choosing barrenness, like to a degree exponentially higher than our age group? Yes, no, like that's what I'm seeing.
I haven't seen statistics, but I do hang out with that crowd because my oldest is an adult, and a lot of her friends are a little older than her, and some are her age, and if we're going to talk about selfishness, and on its face, that's what you have to call it.
Yeah.
They are really of the generation where selfishness is portrayed as a good thing. All of the commercials and all of the rhetoric that you hear on social media and in their circles is, you have to do what you want. You have to follow your own heart. Certainly this was, in our generation too. But really, it's like it is the standard behind all of the choices that they make. And if that is not the standard, then there's somebody quick to come along and correct them. Well, is that what you want?
Right.
Does that fulfill you? What makes you happy?
Yeah.
And of course, these are, questions that we need to consider, but they're way down on our list. If we're God-fearing women, there aren't a lot of places in the Bible where it talks about following your own heart and seeking your own happiness. God has a whole lot of promises of fulfillment and happiness and joy if you're going to follow his path, which is to lay down your life. And that's a really sour pill to swallow when the religion that you've been brought up in your generation is that of selfishness. And selfishness is portrayed as a good thing, as a wise thing. I think that probably is the primary motivation behind choosing barrenness.
I think so.
Very sadly. I wish it weren't so, but I think it is.
I think you're right. I definitely think you're right. And it's funny because I don't know when's the last time you saw in public or anywhere where it was like, you should give everything to your family and just rely on God to fulfill you. There's such a big thing right now about self-love. What are you doing for self-love today? How have you taken care of you? And you're like, dude, I haven't showered in 3 days. I'm not even thinking about that. But you make it sound so important, and it definitely clashes with everything the Bible says. So when you're caught in the middle, it's not easy.
No, it's not. But let's talk about self-love for a minute. Because it is something a mom has to consider. Definitely. You do have to take care of your own needs. You've got to eat. You've got to shower. You've got to do these things. And it is the focus in a lot of mom groups and Bible studies. Well, you've got to love yourself before you can love others. And I think the word love is really misunderstood, overused, means different things to different people. And Sherry, I think it was you've actually shared something on Facebook recently, a great article about what self-love really is. And in this context, from what I understand, I didn't even read it, but I think I got the gist of it. Self-love is not about taking a bubble bath with candlelight and digging in your heels and demanding that you get your bubble bath and candlelight from your family. but rather it is setting up your life in such a way that you're not going to go insane. You know, paying your bills on time, training your children so that later they're not constantly sabotaging your life, you know, these kinds of things. Am I right? Am I totally getting it wrong?
No, you're totally getting it right. It's, you know, putting in a chore list because that's what you need to do. And maybe you don't want to, and you've been fighting it, and maybe you're not a type A person, but now you've got, you know, 4 or more little people underneath you, and your day is chaotic because there's no structure. And even though you're not that way, you know that's what you need to do. And doing the things that you know you need to do to have a better day, even when you don't want to, because they're not glorious like bubble baths and, well, I need my monthly massage and, you know, getting your hair and nails done. It's not those things that are going to give you self-love. It's the hard stuff that you don't want to do that you know you need to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just on that, Ephesians 5:29 says, after all, no one ever hated their own body.
Yeah.
They feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church. So we don't need to learn self-love. We need to learn to take responsibility for what that actually means, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's not chasing the frivolous stuff. It's actually doing the things day to day, minute to minute, that you know add up over time to set yourself up for a joy-filled life.
Yes. And the model is pretty clear for the Christian. Take up your cross, lay down your life, and follow me. This is what Christ said to do. And Christ didn't, you know, march into the room, pick the best chair, and demand that somebody wash his feet. He did exactly the opposite, and it totally rocked the world of his disciples when he got down in the dirt and did the job of the lowest slave in his society, which I'm sure most people here know that he washed their feet.
Right.
And this is the God of the universe. He created those feet. He created that dirt that he was washing off those feet. But God is so gracious and faithful. And he is not telling us to lay down our lives and follow him because he's some kind of glory hog. Oh, I want all the glory, so you must do this for me. He created us to be fulfilled in that life. He loves us. He wants us to take up our cross and follow him because he knows it is what's best for us. And I would go so far as to say, if you faithfully sow these seeds, maybe for years unnoticed, maybe some of your needs are being set aside for a time, God will meet those needs. He will. He's not just going to ignore his precious child who's laboring and picking up her cross and following him every day. He's not forgetting us. He's not like, oh goodness, how long have you been carrying that cross? Here, come sit down. You know, he's not surprised by this. And this has really come to fruition in my life recently, totally by surprise to me, where my husband has really recently been saying foreign things, uncharacteristic things to my children, like, do you know how many years your mom has been doing everything for this family? And I want you all to think of a way today that you can bless her. And I want her to be able to go to the movie by herself, which isn't something I really want to do, but it's a really nice thought.
Yeah.
And I've been so humbled, really been thinking about all the times that I didn't really lay down my life for my family. But God he will meet those needs.
Yeah.
You know, he will provide the bubble bath or whatever it is that would really bless you at that time and let you know that you're loved and cherished and give you the rest that you need. He is our rest. He is our Sabbath. And I'm going to stay on my soapbox for a minute. Many, many years ago, I was under a really wise pastor who was doing a series on love, and he was basing it on 1 Corinthians 13. And he talked about this notion that you have to love yourself before you can love others. And he he called BS. He said, there is not a person alive who does not love themselves.
That's right.
We don't need to learn how to do this.
That's right.
The Bible says, like you pointed out, Crane, what was that reference? Not Crane Cake.
Ephesians 5:29.
Right. Love others as you love yourself. That is the model God gave us. And he didn't have to provide a caveat. Oh, here's how you love yourself so that you can love others. He didn't. He said, well, you want to know how to love somebody? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And this pastor pointed out, he was speaking to a really young crowd, okay, you know, teenagers, young adults. We all know somebody who we think really hates themselves, and we all feel sorry for them. They really hate themselves. They hate their weight. They hate their skin. They don't like the, you know, and they seem to be a person who really dislikes themselves. And so we say, oh, that person needs to know how to love themselves. But he pointed out that person is actually displaying self-love in a way that maybe we're missing, because if you hate somebody, you really hate them, and they are ugly and they have terrible skin, we're tickled to death. We're like, ha ha, you're ugly. But that's not what these people are doing. They're standing in front of the mirror going, oh, my horrible skin. Oh, my weight. If I could just lose 10 pounds, then I could. No, you're loving yourself. You're feeling sorry for yourself, whom you love.
Yes.
And that's something that really stuck with me. Well, if I'm really going to love others, I'm going to look out for them the way that I would myself, because I definitely know how to think of myself and put my own needs in the forefront of my mind most days. It's my greatest struggle.
Yeah.
I probably said that badly.
Nope, you said it very well. Okay, we're supposed to look up 3 scriptures and tell how each mother looked upon her barrenness. I think it was, let's see. I have Genesis 31. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. Okay, so envy. The next scripture is 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 10 and 11. Sherry, are you rushing to get that one?
No, I'm going to do Luke. You do that.
Okay, you do Luke. I can get Samuel pretty fast.
Oh, good, because we all know my techie skills.
I see you fumbling over there.
And remember how at church I said, oh, I look forward to the day that I can actually hold a real Bible in my lap during church?
Yeah. All right, 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 10 and 11. She was deeply distressed and wept bitterly. Who was this? Oh, well, this was, of course, Samuel. She vowed a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your servant and remember me and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall touch his head. But yeah, verse 10, she wept bitterly. She was deeply distressed and wept bitterly. And Sherry, what's Luke 1:25?
Okay, so I'm going to read Luke 24 and 25, because when I just read 25, it made no sense.
Okay.
It says, after these days his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she kept herself hidden, saying, thus the Lord has done for me in the days when he looked on me to take away my reproach among people.
Yeah. Okay, so barrenness was never something celebrated in the Bible, and yet in America it is sometimes, not all the time. All right, number 7, Psalm 139:15 tells us that God calls the womb where he creates life a secret place. Explain how this truth should affect our attitudes. The verse in English Standard Version says, my frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. So how should this truth affect our attitudes?
It is a secret because we're not in charge.
Yeah.
We don't actually make babies. We joke about making babies, but we don't. We're just along for the ride.
Yes.
And even with all the technology that our society has, and prides itself on being able to make babies in the most vile of manners. Really vile, horrible. It's despicable.
Turkey
To
basement?
say out loud, we have figured out how to actually make babies on our own. We don't need God anymore. There are millions of secrets involved in this process that we will never know. And we need to keep that in mind.
Yes.
I
Agreed.
think it was also cool to look at it too, as in, you know, this is the place, like, God is actively working in you as he's making your baby. Like, that's kind of crazy to think, like, you're the vessel. Like, he's every day something new. You know, you get those little apps on your phone, and it's like, your baby now has fingernails, and your baby now is learning how to swallow. And, like,
Yeah.
I think if you really actively think about it, like, that's God's. Your baby has grown a little bit more. Like, that's kind of cool.
It really is.
Yeah.
All I did was sit on the couch today, and I grew 500,000 brain neurons without even trying.
Woo! Yeah, no, that's, yes, I love that. All right, and last but not least, write down or talk about ways in which you can minister love and acceptance to your baby in the womb. Do you have a testimony of how reading the Word of God, do you have a testimony of how reading the Word of God to your unborn baby has been effectual?
Probably. Not that comes to mind. I don't know if I read the Word to the baby, necessarily.
Sure. Yeah,
But
that's
certainly we read the Word while I'm pregnant. We talk to the baby a lot.
yes.
We give the baby ridiculous nicknames.
Wheezy.
It bonds our family to the baby. It really does. No, I don't know. Does anyone else have anything?
Do you read or play music, like, specifically when you're pregnant, Sherry?
No, not particularly. I'm feeling a little guilty here, if I'm being honest. Like, yeah, it never even occurred to me to read the Bible to my pregnant belly.
It does occur to me, but I think it feels awkward to think about going through with that. I just kind of treat my baby while it's inside like just a part of me, like it's just coming along with me for all the things, and so I don't need to do anything specific necessarily.
Gotcha.
But we talk to the baby, especially when there's a foot up in your rib and you yell at them and, you know, spank them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was a good chapter. I hope that these little videos are well received. I know there's a couple of ladies following along. I'm going to encourage you two here with me. Find one person this week to encourage them to get a book. Encourage them to get. And uh-oh, what happened?
That's weird.
I don't know what you said, because it sounded like you turned into a robot.
Are you muted, Kate?
Yeah, she is.
We heard an echo, and I think what you were going to say is to find somebody and encourage them to grab a book and follow along. Am I right? Excellent. I will do that. I have someone in mind. Bye. Love you all.
Love you too.